kicked-out mother becomes a famous chef. Years later, her ex begs for her help. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. Jessica had always considered herself a resilient woman, but nothing could have prepared her for the day her husband, Greg, demanded a divorce. The words cut through the air like a knife. They were standing in their once cozy kitchen, where countless meals and quiet conversations had filled their lives. Now it felt cold and unwelcoming. Greg was a successful businessman, with a booming voice and a confident stride. He had built his career while Jessica raised their 2 kids, Ben and Lily. She managed the household, cooked meals, and kept everything running like clockwork, but it had been years since Greg acknowledged her contributions. He wanted more. More excitement, more recognition, more than a stay-at-home wife could give. Jessica, you need to face the truth, Greg said, his voice sharp. You have nothing without me. You've wasted your life cooking in this kitchen while I built an empire. I deserve someone who can match my success. Jessica felt a cold chill rush through her. She had known their marriage had grown strained, but she never imagined Greg would leave. He packed his bags, taking his belongings, his connections, and worse, his confidence in her future. He left her with nothing but a small apartment and a few pieces of furniture. As he walked out the door, he delivered his parting blow. You'll never make it without me. For the first few months, Jessica struggled to find her footing. She took odd jobs, working as a waitress in a nearby diner and as a cashier at the local grocery store, just to pay rent and keep food on the table for Ben and Lily. The nights were long, filled with worry and self-doubt. How would she ever rebuild a life that had been shattered? But one night, as she stood in her tiny kitchen preparing dinner for her children, a spark of an idea ignited. Cooking had always been her passion. She had spent years perfecting family recipes handed down by her grandmother, and she knew how to make even the simplest ingredients sing with flavor. What if she could use that skill to create something new? Something that could support her family and prove Greg wrong. With what little savings she had left, Jessica invested in a modest catering business, focusing on events for neighbors and small community gatherings. She called it Flavors of Home, a tribute to the warmth and comfort of homemade meals. Her first clients were hesitant, but once they tasted her food, word spread like wildfire. The people in her town couldn't get enough of her roasted herb chicken, her creamy potato gratin, and her decadent chocolate cakes. As her reputation grew, so did her confidence. Jessica expanded her offerings to include weekend pop-up dinners at the local park. She served dishes inspired by the meals she used to cook for Greg, but with her own twist. Bold spices, fresh herbs, and an attention to detail that made each bite an experience. Soon, the crowds at her pop-ups grew, with patrons lining up around the block just to taste her creations. Yet, even as her business began to thrive, there was a gnawing sense of unfinished business. Jessica couldn't forget Greg's words, nor the sting of being discarded like an old apron. But she kept her focus on Ben and Lily, who cheered her on at every turn. They became her taste testers, her cheerleaders, and her reason to keep going. Then came the break that changed everything. A renowned food critic visited one of her pop-up dinners, writing a glowing review that praised Jessica's heartfelt approach to cuisine and the comfort of tradition blended with unexpected flavors. The article went viral, attracting attention from local TV stations and food bloggers. Jessica found herself being interviewed about her journey, her struggles, and the passion behind Flavors of Home. As the interview aired, Greg watched from the couch of his now empty luxury apartment. His new life hadn't gone as planned. His flashy business deals had crumbled, and the younger woman he left Jessica for had moved on, seeking wealthier prospects. He watched Jessica's interview with disbelief, realizing that she was becoming everything he once claimed she could never be: successful, independent, and admired. Jessica, meanwhile, had no time to dwell on Greg's potential reactions. She was busy turning her pop-up into a permanent restaurant. With a little help from a small business loan, she rented a cozy space on a bustling street corner, transforming it into a haven of warm lighting, vintage decor, and the delicious aromas of home-cooked meals. She named it Flavors of Forgiveness, a nod to the journey she had taken and the emotional battles she had fought. Jessica's restaurant quickly became a neighborhood staple, attracting both locals and tourists eager to experience the food that had won over the town. Her staff, a small but passionate team, shared her vision of creating a space where everyone felt welcome. And with each new dish, Jessica poured her heart into proving, to herself and to her children, that she could build a new life from the ashes of the old. But as the restaurant thrived, a shadow from the past loomed closer. Greg, his life in shambles, was desperate for a new beginning. Unbeknownst to Jessica, he had been following her success closely, watching as she rebuilt herself and became everything he had never believed she could be. One cold winter evening, as Jessica wiped down the counters after another sold-out dinner service, she heard a knock on the restaurant's front door. It was Greg, standing in the snow, looking like a man who had been beaten by life. His suit, once tailored and pristine, now hung loosely from his shoulders, and his face was drawn with desperation. Jessica stared at him through the glass, a rush of memories and emotions flooding her mind. She opened the door slowly, bracing herself for whatever he had come to say. "Jessica, I need a job," Greg stammered, his voice cracking. "Please, I have nowhere else to go." Jessica stood in the doorway, the cold air rushing in from outside, carrying with it 1,000 unsaid words. Greg's once confident demeanor was nowhere to be found. He was a shadow of the man who had walked out on her. For a moment, Jessica almost felt a pang of pity for him. Almost. But then she remembered the endless nights of struggling to make ends meet, the tears she cried alone, and the determination it took to rebuild her life from nothing. She crossed her arms, steadying herself. "What are you doing here, Greg? You said I would never make it without you, remember?" Greg shifted on his feet, his breath fogging in the night air. "Jessica, I know I messed up. I didn't know things would turn out like this. My business failed and I've lost everything. I need a fresh start and I thought, maybe you could help me out. Please." The words felt like a slap in the face, but also like a strange, twisted vindication. The man who had once mocked her for her lack of ambition was now asking her for help. She studied him closely, searching his eyes for any hint of insincerity, but all she saw was desperation. Part of her wanted to turn him away, to let him feel the sting of rejection that she had endured. Yet another part of her, the part that had always believed in forgiveness, hesitated. "Why should I help you, Greg?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. "You didn't think twice when you walked out on me and the kids. Now you're back because you're out of options. What do you expect me to do? Just hand you a job out of the kindness of my heart?" Greg's shoulders slumped, and he looked down at the ground. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Jess. I know I don't deserve it. But I'm willing to do anything. Dishwashing, cleaning floors, whatever you need. Just give me a chance. Please." Jessica took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. This was a moment she had imagined countless times, but now that it was here, it didn't feel as satisfying as she had expected. She glanced back at the cozy interior of her restaurant, at the staff who had become like family to her, and at the life she had built without him. She realized that she no longer needed Greg to validate her worth. Still, she couldn't deny the poetic justice of the situation. She knew she had the upper hand now, and perhaps it was time to show Greg what it meant to truly work for something, to appreciate the effort that went into creating success. She stepped aside and gestured for him to enter. "All right, Greg. I'll give you a trial. You can start as a dishwasher. But don't think for a second that this means I've forgiven you." Greg's eyes lit up with relief, and he followed her into the warmth of the restaurant. As she introduced him to the kitchen staff, who eyed him with a mix of curiosity and suspicion, Jessica felt a strange sense of power, a power she had never known she possessed. She watched as Greg rolled up his sleeves and began to scrub pots and pans, his hands trembling with cold and exhaustion. It was a far cry from the life of luxury he had once enjoyed, but he seemed determined to prove himself. In the weeks that followed, Greg kept his head down and worked tirelessly, never once complaining about the long hours or the demanding pace. Jessica kept a close watch on him, wary of any sign that he might try to undermine her or take advantage of her generosity. But Greg remained humble, showing up on time every day and doing the work no one else wanted to do. As winter turned to spring, word spread among the restaurant staff about Greg's unexpected arrival. Rumors flew, but Jessica remained tight-lipped, unwilling to share the complicated history between them. She focused instead on her growing business, launching new menu items that attracted even more customers. The restaurant flourished, and she found herself busier than ever, balancing the demands of being a boss with her role as a mother. Despite everything, a part of Jessica found herself softening toward Greg. Late at night, after the last guests had left and the kitchen had been cleaned, they sometimes exchanged a few words. Brief, cautious conversations about their children, their past, and the mistakes that had led them to this point. Greg spoke of the regret he felt, the realization that he had thrown away a good thing in pursuit of a shallow fantasy. "I was so focused on proving myself, on being someone important, that I didn't see what I already had," he confessed one evening, his voice barely above a whisper. "You were always there for me and I took you for granted. Sorry, Jess. I really am." Jessica didn't know how to respond. She had waited so long to hear those words, but now that she did, they seemed too little too late. Yet, she couldn't deny that he seemed genuinely changed. The arrogant man who had once flaunted his success was gone, replaced by someone who seemed humbled by his losses. But she remained cautious, unsure if she could truly trust his transformation. Then, one fateful night, as they were closing up the restaurant, Jessica found an old envelope tucked behind one of the spice racks in the kitchen. It was dusty and faded, but she recognized Greg's handwriting on the front. Curious, she opened it and found a series of letters that Greg had written to her in the early years of their marriage, before everything went wrong. The letters revealed a side of Greg she had long forgotten, a man who once dreamed of building a life together, who admired her passion for cooking and believed in her potential. But there was something else too. A note at the end, written just before he left, where he confessed his fear of being overshadowed by her talent. He admitted that he had pushed her away because he couldn't bear the thought of her outshining him. Jessica's hands trembled as she read the words, a whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. The revelation hit her like a tidal wave. All those years, she had believed Greg had left because he saw her as weak and insignificant. But the truth was that he had been threatened by her strength, by the very qualities that had made her rise from the ashes. It was a twist she hadn't seen coming, a shift that reframed everything she thought she knew about their past. She confronted Greg the next day, showing him the letter. He looked as though he might collapse under the weight of his own shame. "I never wanted you to find that, Jess," he said, his voice cracking. "I was afraid that if you knew how much I envied you, you'd realize you never needed me at all." Jessica felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and an unexpected sense of liberation. The truth had been buried for so long, but now that it was out, she saw things clearly. She had spent years believing she was the one who had been inadequate, but in reality, Greg had feared her potential all along. The realization gave her the final closure she needed. But as Greg stood there, defeated and exposed, Jessica faced a choice. Would she use this revelation to cut him down, to make him feel as small as he once made her feel? Or would she take the high road, offering him the same forgiveness she had named her restaurant after? She took a deep breath, letting the weight of the past slip from her shoulders. "Greg, I don't know if I can ever forgive you completely," she said quietly. "But I can try. For the sake of our kids and for the sake of moving on. You can stay on, but things between us will never go back to what they were." Greg nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "Thank you, Jess. I promise I'll make things right." As the weeks went on, Greg tried to live up to his promise. He became a fixture in the kitchen, not just as a dishwasher but as someone willing to do whatever it took to help Jessica's dream succeed. He scrubbed floors, took out the trash, and even learned to help with basic prep work when the kitchen was swamped. The staff began to see him as more than just the disgraced ex-husband. They saw a man humbled by life, trying to make amends. Jessica, however, kept a careful distance. She couldn't deny that he had changed, but the scars of the past were still fresh. She focused on her children, her restaurant, and the steady stream of customers who filled the dining room each night. Flavors of Forgiveness continued to thrive, attracting food lovers from all over the city. The media buzz around her story grew, and soon, Jessica was invited to appear on a popular daytime talk show to share her journey from struggle to success. The day of the interview arrived, and Jessica was a bundle of nerves as she sat backstage, waiting for her segment. She glanced over the audience, catching a glimpse of Ben and Lily, who had taken seats in the front row. Greg sat beside them, his presence still a reminder of everything that had happened, but now it felt different, like a piece of her story that she had finally come to terms with. As the host introduced her, Jessica took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage, the bright lights nearly blinding her. She shared her story with raw honesty, talking about the pain of being abandoned, the struggles of raising her children alone, and the fire that had driven her to build something better. The audience listened intently, their expressions a mix of sympathy and admiration. But then, as the host leaned in for a final question, the moment took an unexpected turn. "Jessica, you've built an incredible life for yourself, and your story has inspired so many people. But I have to ask, what was it like seeing your ex-husband walk through those doors, begging for a job? Was it difficult to forgive him after everything he put you through?" Jessica hesitated, her mind racing through the tangled emotions she had carried for so long. She thought of the letter she had found, the nights of doubt, and the slow, painful process of reclaiming her life. She thought of Greg's efforts to change and the way he had quietly supported her behind the scenes. She turned to the audience, the cameras capturing every nuance of her expression. "Forgiving someone isn't easy," she began, her voice steady. "It's messy and it takes time. But I realized that forgiveness isn't about letting someone back into your life. It's about letting go of the power their actions have over you. Greg and I have a complicated history, but I believe that people can change, if they truly want to. And while I don't know what the future holds for us, I do know this: I won't let the past define me." The audience erupted into applause, and the host smiled warmly. But as the interview wrapped up and Jessica made her way back to her family, she saw something in Greg's eyes, something she hadn't seen before. It wasn't just relief or gratitude. It was a quiet sadness, a recognition that no matter how much he tried, he couldn't undo the damage he had done. In the days that followed, things seemed to settle into a new normal. Jessica returned to her restaurant, her staff, and her children, while Greg continued to work in the background, grateful for the second chance he had been given. But beneath the surface, tension lingered. Jessica could sense that Greg was holding something back, a secret that weighed heavily on him. She tried to brush it off, telling herself that whatever it was, it didn't matter anymore. Then, one evening, just as the dinner rush was winding down, Greg approached her with a serious expression. "Jessica, there's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's about the money I took when I left. I wasn't completely honest about it." Jessica froze, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. "What do you mean, Greg? You already told me you lost everything in those bad investments." Greg shook his head, his face pale. "I did lose most of it, but not all. There's a bank account hidden in my name. I kept it as a safety net in case things went wrong. I'm telling you now because I don't want to keep lying to you, not when you've given me a chance I didn't deserve." The confession hit Jessica like a punch to the gut. All this time, while she had been struggling to make ends meet, Greg had secretly held on to a small fortune. Anger bubbled up inside her, threatening to overwhelm her composure. "You had money all along, and you let me struggle, let me believe that we were both at rock bottom." Greg's face crumpled, and he looked down at the floor. "I know I was wrong, Jess. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm telling you because I don't want to be that person anymore. I want to make things right, even if it's too late." Jessica took a step back, her mind racing. Part of her wanted to scream at him, to throw him out of her restaurant and out of her life for good. But another part, the part that had fought so hard to reclaim her sense of self, refused to let the anger consume her. She had built something beautiful from the rubble of her old life, and she wasn't about to let Greg's deceit ruin it. She met his gaze, her expression cold but controlled. "Here's what's going to happen, Greg. You're going to transfer every penny in that account to me. Not because I need it, but because it's the right thing to do. And after that, I think it's best if you leave. You've done what you came to do, but I can't have you in my life anymore. Not like this." Greg's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded, understanding that this was the consequence of his actions. The next day, the transfer was made, and Jessica watched as Greg packed up his belongings, leaving the restaurant for the last time. She felt a strange mix of relief and sadness, knowing that this chapter of her life was finally coming to a close. In the weeks that followed, Jessica poured her energy into her restaurant, expanding the menu, hiring new staff, and planning community events that brought even more warmth and life to Flavors of Forgiveness. She used the money Greg had given back to invest in a scholarship fund for young chefs, hoping to give others the opportunities she had fought so hard for. One summer evening, as she stood outside the restaurant, watching the sun set over the bustling city street, Ben and Lily by her side, Jessica realized that she had finally let go of the past. She had faced her fears, her doubts, and the ghosts of her old life. And in doing so, she had discovered a strength she never knew she possessed. The twist, she realized, wasn't just that Greg had come back to her life. It was that she had grown beyond the need for his validation. She had forgiven him, not for his sake, but for hers. And in doing so, she had found a peace that no amount of success could ever provide. As the evening breeze swept through the air, carrying with it the laughter of families and the aroma of her signature dishes, Jessica smiled, knowing that she had finally written her own recipe for happiness. And this time, it was one that no one could take away from her. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story.